Hey everybody, I hope that you are well. Today we are going to be talking about, I would say, one of the more important and influential parts of our government that is not actually part of our government, but I don't think you can really understand how American government actually functions without understanding interest groups. So today we are going to talk about what interest groups are, what they do, and how interest groups actually shape the government and have a tremendous impact on our society. And maybe even, depending on time, examine some of the arguments both for and against the influence of interest groups in our government. So let's dive in. So, interest groups, along with the media and other other institutions are known as linkage institutions. So these are institutions that actually link the people with the actual government. If you think about it, you as an individual only really have the ability to influence the government really one time a year, and that is when you actually vote for elections by choosing your elected officials. And what linkage institutions do is they actually provide another form of contact with the institutions of government so that you, me, everybody can have some sort of impact or some sort of influence over what the government actually does. So, one example of that is actually interest groups. You've probably heard of interest groups. They're sometimes known as special interest groups. You can kind of think of them as influence groups because that's what they do. Interest groups, the goal of an interest group is to influence and to shape the government for the benefit of whatever your group is. So, an interest group, in terms of a working definition, is a group of people with a shared common interest that want to shape the government to benefit that group. So that's kind of a weird understanding. Let me give you a concrete example. I am actually a member of the Virginia Education Association, the VEA, and that is an interest group that represents teachers. So what the VEA does is they actually go and they lobby. They try to influence and to shape. In fact, we have the term down here. They try to shape the government to benefit that group. In this case, it is teachers. So what the VEA does, which I actually part of my paycheck goes to the VEA, they go to Richmond and they will lobby for things like higher teacher salary or smaller classroom sizes or more funding for schools. Things that teachers would want. So the act of trying to get the government or an individual member of the government to do something that your group wants, that is called lobbying. The VEA, they actually have a number of lobbyists. These are people who represent the interest groups and try to influence the government. We hire lobbyists to actually try to get the things that you want. And this happens for every type of interest group. A really famous one, you've probably heard of the National Rifle Association. That is a interest group of gun owners, people who um, support gun ownership and generally do not want to have more gun control or what they would say are limitations on gun rights. So the NRA will hire lobbyists, and what they will do is they will go to Washington, they will go to Richmond, they will go to whatever center of government, and they will try to defeat any new gun control measurement. The UAW, that's the United Auto Workers. They represent people who work for the car manufacturing companies, so auto workers. In my home area of Detroit, they are very, very, very big, very, very powerful. So effectively, they try to get the government to support whatever it is that that group wants. We have the NEA, National Education Association. That's a national teacher education group, which I am actually not a member of. So there are thousands and thousands and thousands of interest groups. They all represent their group. There are interest groups for farmers. There are interest groups, pretty much you name it, there is an interest group for it. So again, the lobbyists are the people who work for the interest group, and they try to actually influence the government for things that that group would want. Now, why are they called lobbyists? Good question, because they actually, in fact, I've literally seen this happen. I worked for a time in the Michigan House of Representatives, and this is what I saw. I would go outside of the chamber, and there were people dressed up very nice in the lobby. And what these guys are is they are the lobbyists. They work for the interest groups. And the reason that they are outside of the House of Representatives, outside of the Senate, outside of the halls of power, is because they actually represent those groups. So let's say that this guy works for the VEA. Let's say that they are in Richmond. What he will do is he will actually contact people who are inside of the chamber. Let's say this is the chamber over here. He will write little notes and messages, not just in the lobby. They will do this outside of the lobby as well. But they will contact the people in that chamber and try to get them to vote the way that this guy would want them to vote. So one thing I will let you know is part of your attitude on interest groups depends on the actual group. If you like whatever that group represents, then you're probably going to have a positive view of that group. If you are a conservative Republican who is really against gun control, then you are going to love the NRA. If you are someone who believes in more gun control, you are not going to like the NRA. It just kind of comes down to your attitude on the individual issue. Here are some examples. Again, this is a very, 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 very small number. The most powerful one in the entire country, right here, the AARP, the American Association of Retired Persons. They are extremely powerful because they represent senior citizens, and there's a lot of them. Generally, the power of the group is going to be connected with the number of members. The bigger the group, AARP, NRA is huge, the more power that they are going to have. Just kind of a general rule of thumb. Here is, so I actually used to work here. Here's the Michigan State House of Representatives. Old picture. Okay, so what do interest groups actually do? The biggest thing that they do is they influence the government on behalf of whatever that group is. So again, I may be beating a dead horse here, but VEA, Virginia Education Association, they are going to try to get higher teacher salary, smaller classrooms. They are going to try to do things that that group would want. If it's a interest group representing farmers, maybe they want more federal aid for farmers. They want the government to do things that the farmers are going to support. That's a little bit over here as well. What they're also going to do is they are going to raise awareness. They are going to educate the public as to whatever their position is. So take my group, the VEA. They're probably going to maybe put commercials out there saying, oh, we need smaller classroom sizes, or whatever they're advocating. They're going to try to persuade the public in general so that they get more support. And then one element too, and this is really basic, interest groups actually play a major role when it comes to educating people in the House, educating people in the Senate. And this really does make sense. If you are an interest group that represents an environmental group, if you take the Sierra Club, that's an environmental group who really want less pollution. They want no more logging. They don't want mining to happen as much. Well, they are going to be experts on environmental issues. And so if you are a senator, or if you are a congressman, or if you are the president and you don't know that much about environmental issues, you may lean on them. You may actually get some of your information from that actual interest group. Take the United Auto Workers. If I'm a congressman, maybe I don't know that much about what it's like to work in an auto manufacturing plant. So they will educate you. And so these interest groups are actually have lots of information and can actually play a role in educating those people who are voting on issues. You should obviously be a little skeptical when you're getting your information from the interest groups because they're obviously going to be biased. But sometimes they can actually be useful sources of information. And one thing too, for every interest group, there is oftentimes a counter interest group. So you have the Sierra Club, which does not want mining, right? Well, you're also going to have an interest group for the mining companies. They are naturally going to kind of combat each other. And so if you talk to both groups, you may actually get both perspectives at the very least. So in terms of the biggest thing, so if you are a lobbyist, if you are an interest group, how do you actually go about winning? How do you go about making sure that whatever it is that you want happens? So if the VEA, the Virginia Education Association, they represent me. Let's say they say, okay, we want higher teacher salaries. Okay, how do you go about doing that? And these are four of probably the biggest things that you will do. The most basic is what you call direct lobbying. That's where you actually go and you talk to the people who are legislators. You talk to the congressman, you talk to the members of the House of Delegates, you talk to the governor, you talk to whoever has power or a role within this process, and you just try to persuade them. You try to convince them. You try to be like, hey, here is why we need this. Here is why this is something that should happen. That's really basic. That's going to happen with a phone call. You're going to take maybe somebody out to lunch. Maybe you're going to give them information. But that one's not bad. That one's not nefarious. You're going to just try to persuade whoever it is that has the power to do whatever it is that you want them to do. A big one, and this one is much more. See, this one you don't witness this. You're not going to see this happen unless you're in that office. The one you are going to see though is what's called electioneering. Okay, you are going to try to support people who already hold that opinion, right? So let's say that there's a congressional election in Virginia. You have someone in Virginia who is running for Congress. And let's say I represent the NRA, the National Rifle Association, and I do not want any more gun control. Well, Republicans tend to be opposed to more gun control. Democrats tend to want more gun control. So a very simple thing that you're going to do is you're going to try to make sure that the Republican, the individual candidate, wins that office. This person will get elected, and then when they are elected, they will vote against gun control. So the idea of electing people that already support you, that is influencing elections. That is called electioneering. And by the way, there are interest groups. There's one called Sandy Hook Promise that wants more gun control. So that interest group is going to try to help make sure that people who want more gun control win. And so lobbyists and interest groups, they play a huge role in terms of trying to shape the outcome of elections. And that one is much more visible. When we have elections this November for the president, and you're actually watching those commercials, you may notice that they have I'm Barack Obama, I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message, right? When they do that message, that commercial is being paid by the campaign. But then you will sometimes have commercials, and it'll say, this commercial is brought to you by the National Rifle Association, or this commercial is brought to you by the Virginia Education Association. When you see those types of commercials, you know that they are trying to influence the election. I do need to wrap up, so I'm going to kind of skip the end of the slides. Litigation, this happens when you use the court system. They will try to, the NAACP, the National Association of Colored Persons, that is a civil rights organization. They sued successfully in the Brown versus Board of Education case. Now, in this case, to use litigation, again, you have to have some sort of legal issue or some sort of constitutional issue. So you can only do that if there's something happening that's illegal that you're trying to stop. Going public is a lot like electioneering. That's when you appeal directly to the public to try to shape public opinion, which will then pressure your elected officials. So, last thing I will do is I'm going to leave that. Look at your own time. Last thing I will say, just in terms of the overall direction, is with this increased spending, the amount of money that is being contributed in the form of electioneering, that has gone up dramatically. So campaigns are getting more and more and more expensive. So I am out of time. I do need to cut it there. I hope you guys are doing well. Again, check out my office hours if you have any questions, or just send me an email. Okay, bye.